I just had one. I was going to pause the video at a section. There's a slide I want to bring in.
And the paradigm that I have, relationships, spiritual conversations, decision.
That's what I wanted to show.
Okay.
I could not take a screenshot of it, so.
Oh.
But yeah, I can send you the link again if you've lost it.
Please,
I can reset your password.
and didn't realize I deleted till I went back and looked for it a couple nights.
It's also, if you go under right now, I don't know how it is on the desktop, but on the app, the top left, there's a menu. And if you expand that down, it'll say Bethel Baptist Church of Rocky Mount. You click on that, and then it will show up. I've added it to one of the lists for our
'Cause
church.
I've got the queue over there, for stuff I've looked
Yeah.
at,
Yeah.
It saves everything that I've looked at, but I didn't know it had that.
Well, here, can I do it?
Page I'll look at.
So this little hamburger button right here,
Yeah.
if you expand that and go to Bethel Baptist of Rocky Mount,
Okay, cool.
and
I
then
even went and looked at our
Soul
Facebook
Whisperer.
page, and it's still got the 7 letters from 7.
Yeah, I need to update all
Well,
that.
you've been kinda busy.
I have been kind of.
Is that in the right now media?
Yeah, in the app. I don't know how this is in the desktop, but like on a regular computer. I would think it's very similar. And I'll probably miss. There we go.
There you go.
All right. So I hope everybody had a great week. We've had some needs, and I hope you've been praying. We've had Molly was in the hospital. Now Robin's mom is in the hospital.
What is going on with her?
Well, my understanding as of Thursday night was she had a severe ear infection and what do you call it, bronchitis. And at her age, it's just
Oh, yeah.
super hard. Tiffany's probably got an update for us.
Yeah, I just got the phone with Mama. She had a good night, but this morning it's not so hot. They had to put her on 2 more antibiotics, and they're having to do a test because they think the mucus is aspirating into her lungs. So they're going to be doing that in a little bit. They ordered a bunch of tests. Her heart rate skyrocketed, her blood pressure rocketed, so they put her on 2 new antibiotics
Okay.
and stuff. And they just got a phone call. They think Papa has the same thing.
Oh,
So
goodness.
my aunt and uncle are on their way up there to get him.
Okay. So lots of prayer needed. So keep everybody in your prayers. Good to see Bobby back. Hope Debbie doing all right?
She's slow to recover, so
Yeah.
she's still struggling a little bit.
Yeah. So
She is recovering.
Yeah, it seems to be getting better, but she just can't. She has no energy. She's just.
that's good. Well, I mean, it's good to hear that she's recovering, but I've heard, and we've had people in this church, some people recover and it's like they're back at it, and then some people take months,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's just, but I'm glad that she's getting better and she's not hospitalized or anything like that. So, all in all, been a busy week. And so, but we're going to come back to our study on Soul Whisper, or evangelism, however you want to think about it. This week's discussion was on drawing. He calls it drawing, and he's kind of laid out this foundation to kind of help some of us who are not as comfortable talking with people, to give us a foundation. It's also, I think, good, even if we are comfortable talking with people, to kind of give us a new foundation, because we talked about last week how the world has changed. And, we're starting from further and further behind from Christ, and so sometimes our methods need to adapt, especially when we're coming into this new world. So here soon, the majority of people will be under the age of 50 in church, right? That's not too far away. And so those people are coming up. How do we talk to them? And so this is an idea of an approach that he's taken through his work, through associations and ministry in large churches, and he's adapted it for us. And I think it's great. But today's lesson is on drawing, and if I could make a suggestion to Gary, I would call this drawing out. Because when I first hear the word drawing, I feel like it means like coming closer, like drawing in or becoming, pulling them or getting closer. But actually what he's referring to is drawing out from the person you're talking to. drawing out their true feelings. And that's where we need to start, because that's one of the key points of this is you don't know where anybody is until they express it themselves. You may think you know where they are. You may think you know how they feel. And you're probably wrong, right? And that's how we get ourselves in trouble, is we assume too much about the other person. So step one is to get them to express their feelings. Okay, that way you know where to go. Does everybody follow me with that? Because it's easy to be like, oh, well, they come from this family, like you know them or you know something about them. Oh, well, they must think this. No, they don't. They may not. And so you have to get them to express themselves. Step one, that's the drawing out. And he takes this, all of this is kind of based on that idea of the woman at the well, right? And she's talking about drawing water. Well, he's using that as figurative language. We're going to draw out from that person. And where this comes into, this is kind of the big picture of his ministry, or his big idea. First of all, we're starting with relationships with people. That is the paradigm of his ministry, is you cannot even get to talk to people. You don't have a seat at the table until they get to know you, right? You have a relationship with them. And that means, it doesn't have to be like you got to be best friends for 10 years relationship, but more than just a stranger off the street, okay? And then where we come into, that gets you a seat at the table to have these spiritual conversations. And that's where drawing is. Drawing, if you could divide up spiritual conversations into a bunch of different steps, drawing is step one. Where are they at? Where are they coming from? And this could be something simple. He gives the example of, in the video, I'm sorry, take that back, because I've been reading the book too, and so it's kind of getting them mixed up. In the book, he gives an example of a conversation where he's doing softball with his kids. And, around the softball, he's talking with other dads and stuff. And one of the dads he's talking to, getting to know him, right? He travels a lot for his work, and he's been to Europe and Asia. Well, one of Gary's commonalities is, hey, I've also been to Europe and Asia, and I've been to Africa as well. And so they started a conversation on that. And the guy he was talking to was really interested in his travels in Africa because he'd never been there or anything. And so Gary just talked to him about his work there in Africa. And as an evangelist, right, talking about how the people there are very poor, but they're very into their religion. And when they go to, in his work at the church, he was just very impressed with how they rose above that when they all came to church service. And so the guy just made the off comment that, well, that's what religion should do for people, to uplift them. Drawing, right? Now we're starting that process. Because then the next comment is, hey, Gary says, well, hey, you sound like you have a background with church and stuff. That gets into the conversation. Well, it turns out the guy is a former Catholic. And, he was Catholic, raised Catholic. He starts talking about this, and then, he goes into former Catholic. And then so Gary kind of, asks some questions about that. That's the start of this process, right? That's as simple as it can be, right? You don't have to, it's not like you're going from like 0 to 100. We're getting to know these people. Where are you coming from? We have a friend who's former Catholic as well. And so we talked to her one day, and she said something like, yeah, Americans are just Christian by default. I was like, no, but that is a viewpoint. And at this point, I want to be clear. Don't shoot the person down. Like, we're not there to disagree. We're there to get their viewpoint. Now, we may not agree, but that's not the point right now.
What are you talking about her saying that Americans are Christian by default?
And so we have a lot of things in our mind. And I think that's what she meant. But in my mind, I was like, well, you know, you're not Christian. Nobody's born Christian, right? And I want to be very clear, but, you know, you kind of got to hold yourself back because that's not the point now, right? We're just,
You immediately shoot them down,
Yeah.
and you just stop the conversation.
yeah, we don't want to do that. We want to probe further. But what do you mean by Christian by default? I've never heard that before because I hadn't. I've never heard that before. What do you mean by that? And try to get them to just bring out their true feelings. And it's a little bit of an art because people have been trained to hide their true feelings, right? If you've been in the workplace, right, there are some things that, you know, we don't talk about religion at work. And so that kind of gets ingrained into people. Brian, you don't count. Sorry, man.
Well, idea, people don't really know what they believe to start with. They're confused about what they believe. And they'll tell you, well, I felt like this is right, but I'm not sure, but and the confusion is
You will find the more you probe out of people, the more inconsistent they are with themselves, usually. Because you'll pick up on, they'll say one thing, and then in a different conversation, they'll say something else. And then you're going to be, that's a great opportunity for you to be like, well, in our previous conversation, you said this. But now you're saying, how do you reconcile the two? Not judgmental. We're not trying to like gotcha kind of game. But we're trying to get them to think a little bit clearer. Because people are inconsistent. We're not logical creatures, really. Like, we justify things when they're convenient for us. And this will come out in conversation, unless they have a really deep or established moral code for themselves, which most people do not.
But, you know, like you were talking about Catholic girl, they go through a routine. It's like a ritual thing that they go through between their services the whole time, and there's nothing much ever change.
Mm-hmm.
Here we come in, and we're gonna hear what's going on, or what's happening, and it's not like we just come in and go through this motion of what we're doing all the time. It's a secular thing.
Yeah.
That's why there's a need for the change of how we do things and all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, depending on the different denomination, and this is why it's so good to have a background in a wide variety of topics, because we're not Catholic here, you know, but if you're dealing with a Catholic friend or a Presbyterian friend or what, it would be wise to learn something about that, because that will give you an idea of their background. Like, because when they're talking about, well, we went to Mass, you know, 5 times a week, right? But you know that a good Catholic has Mass every day, or, you know, that is super devout. What does Mass look like? How long is Mass? What kind of commitment is that? Right? It would help for you to know those things. And that, you know, Catholic's one example. It could be anything. Maybe they're coming from a Buddhist background. I mean, that's a completely different viewpoint. And so that will give you the more connections you can make, right, the better off you're going to have to establish this relationship.
And what you get into a lot is the people that's out there that's got their name in society, the movie stars, the whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's people that want to act like it's bad. They want to follow whatever it is they're doing. If they say they're in this religion, that, whatever, you find out it isn't concept. They want to catch on to that too.
Mm-hmm.
We were just talking about it yesterday, like back when the Beatles wanted to be Hindu.
Yeah.
It's a crave. And at that particular time, if you go back and look at it, how many people wanted to ship? Because they thought they were doing the right thing.
We're always going to battle external influences.
And Christianity is moving up because we're seeing more of it.
Mm-hmm.
People want true, solid answers. And where do you find them?
Yeah.
And a lot of times people say, go to the Bible.
And
The Bible.
there's been a resurgence in Christian thought over the past probably 40 years of deep Christian thought, where Christian apologists and philosophers have really come back into prominence. Now, for most day-to-day type stuff, we don't think of that, right? But these concepts come down from like answers to the problem of evil, right? For example, you know, people get all bent out of shape. You know, why is there evil in the world if God is so good, right? Well, there's answers to that question. And when we get that, if you get to that point, you can bring that to the table. But that has been answered, and it's been answered for a while. But people, every generation has to learn these things for themselves, right? But at this point in the process, we're not even there yet, right? We're not there yet. We're just trying to get them to come out of their shell a little bit so we can connect with them to see, well, where are we and where do we need to go? Because they could say something like, well, I'm a Christian, but I was baptized, I believe in God, I believe in Jesus, but, you know, this happened at my church, and it really tore me apart, and I haven't been back since. Well, that's a different scenario than somebody who just doesn't believe at all, right?
Well, we gotta realize too that Satan is constantly working, trying to keep people away,
He is.
you know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And he's the great deceiver,
Yeah.
you know.
Yep.
And that's where all the misinformation comes from.
Yeah. And so you, as an ambassador for Christ, you're just trying to get them, right? Not saying we're never gonna like correct misinformation, but focus. Like step one is let's get them out of their shell, right? And then as we develop that relationship deeper, we get more comfortable, right? Because you wouldn't expect like a new person that you just acquainted with said, you know, make a major correction in your life. Like, well, you shouldn't do that. Whereas a deep friend could tell you that, hey, you know, I'm really concerned about you. I think you should stop doing this. And you would take that in a deeper consideration than just some guy off the street, right? That's all we're trying to do. Now, I brought up some notes here. I don't know if you can I turn this sideways? Ha ha!
That's better.
I took some notes, and so in the video, he gives this example of rejection. I think, Marie, you asked about this. What happens when somebody just shuts us down from talking about this?
Rejection.
Mm-hmm. And somebody asked about it.
I mentioned, sometimes it's hard to relate to others because they reject you.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
So-
hard to accept rejection.
So when you say reject you, what do you mean? Like they don't like you personally, or?
They just don't want to listen to you.
Okay. So I know you haven't seen the video, but go back. I'll send you a link. But go back and watch this because he spends the first half of the video talking about this circumstance. One of his friends, this is like fourth person perspective. One of his friends was talking to one of her friends, two ladies talking. And they were, at a luncheon or something. And they got to talking, and she said something came out about faith and what they believe. And the other lady says, we don't talk about religion in my family. And just kind of stops the conversation. And so the first lady was asking Gary, what do you do in that situation? Because that is a common situation. And Gary takes it as this is a good opportunity for clarification. And in this clarification, even in this step, we're trying to draw them out. And so he was suggesting, go back to your friend lovingly and say, hey, last time we talked, you said that we don't talk about religion in your family, as a person that cares for you. What did you mean by that? Because what we're trying to figure out is, we don't talk about religion in our family because I don't know enough about it and so I'm intimidated by the subject? Or do we mean we don't talk about religion in my family because the last time we talked about it, somebody shut me down and I was hurt? Or we don't talk about religion in my family because we all believe different things and we all just get in arguments? Like, what do you mean by that? And all we're trying to do is get them to express themselves. Because, again, we don't know where people are at until they express it themselves. And so, it's more art than science.
I get angry because, for an example, I'm in a car.
Mm-hmm.
I have a person that was raised Jewish
Mhm.
religion, a non-believer, which is an atheist, and then me
Mhm.
in the back seat. And
Sounds
they're
like the
making
setup for
fun
some joke here.
of
Mm-hmm.
my Jesus, my Lord.
Mhm.
And so I got angry, and I said, if you're gonna talk angry about my Lord, I said, just stop the car, I'll get out.
Mhm.
And they just shut up, and we didn't talk the rest of the way home.
Mhm.
And that's just odd.
Yeah, it is odd.
It was hurtful, you know?
Mhm. Mhm. Well, people.
Makes it uncomfortable.
Yeah, very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And then there was a child in the car,
Mhm.
and that kid did not have to hear all that.
Yeah. Yeah, and people put us in all kinds of strange situations. But I would suggest if we're ever going to talk to them about it, because now what you've done is you've kind of said, I don't want to talk about religion.
I know.
Because,
I'm doing the
you know,
wrong thing, you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
wrong.
So I would suggest, if you ever find yourself getting angry, right, you need to pause for yourself and maybe circle back later when you can handle it. Now, in a car situation where you're in enclosed space, I mean, if you know that situation is going to be there, I mean, prepare yourself. Like, there's only so many circumstances we can cover in one class. But to take your example, I think, I think I would have tried to draw out where are they coming from. Like, okay, Jews, and again, we think we know. But there are Jews that say they're Jewish, but then you ask, well, are you practicing Jewish? Because there's a lot of Jews in, it's like cultural Jewish, but they don't actually do anything Jewish, which to me is kind of strange, but hey, that's not the point right now.
He knew, the person that's Jewish, he knew where I was coming from. But the
Mhm.
atheist person was the one making fun of everything.
Yeah, because they're coming from a different perspective.
Yes.
They think everybody who has a religious belief is just silly, probably. Again, you need to get them to express that. And you could say, hey, why do you find this funny? And they would say something like, well, I find, religious beliefs to be silly because they'll probably say something like there's no evidence for it.
I mean, we were going to like a Halloween costume store.
Mm-hmm.
This person wanted to dress up like a pregnant angel, and the other person wanted to dress up like the devil.
Mm-hmm.
That was I did not like that.
Yeah, I can see that being uncomfortable. And maybe in the future, maybe we find a different carpool.
I mean, I was always uncomfortable the whole time I was with them,
But again, how do we even influence people? You got to be around them, right? And I get it; it's uncomfortable. But it would be a conversation. Be like, well, you don't have beliefs yourself, because we just did a whole study on apologetics. And if they have questions, like, well, there's no evidence, then you'd be like, well, I've got 5 good arguments why I believe in God. That's why we do this stuff,
When I
Yes,
get
Brian.
into people I get into Indians up here in the stores, get around people that's whatever, and start talking to them. When they start talking about something that they believe in, I start getting back to moral values.
Mhm.
What do you value? Do you value family, your children? What comes into what? Moral values mean more to people, and I start asking, well, where does moral values come from?
Yeah.
And they want to start with that right there, and they say, well, I was raised this way, I was taught that this is respect for this is
Mhm.
that. And I'm saying, well, I've got a point to put to you, where does all that come from? And you hold up something, and say, where did this come from? And they say, well, it was created. Well, somebody had to create it, right?
Yeah.
How did the universe get started? And they lose their train of thought right there.
Mhm.
And you say, well, you got to have a creator somewhere. Everything has been created. How was it created?
Yeah. And it's a good path to go down
I get into
at a later
I get
point
back to
in
moral
this
values.
process.
It wasn't a wasteful situation for
Mhm.
me, because I got to learn more about the Jewish religion.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that had helped me a little
Yeah,
bit.
I mean, at the worst, okay, so worst case, right? We could take these situations, even if we don't feel that there's a positive note to it, we can always use these situations to learn more about the other people, right? Right? Just to learn more about who they are and where they're coming from, even if they're disrespectful to you or your religion, right? I understand that happens. And will you ever see these people again in the car?
Well, yeah, I would.
Okay. So
Absolutely.
the next time you see them, right, maybe you could start that situation over and say, hey, you remember that time in the car and you said this and I was thinking about that, right? Try to diffuse the situation and ask them a question. And then it really doesn't matter what the question is, because all you're trying to do is trying to open that line of communication again.
I mean, none of us was angry at each other.
Okay, well that's good.
We understood each other very well, but it
Mhm.
just was very hurtful to me.
Yeah.
But the positive thing was I got to learn a little bit about Jewish religion.
Yeah. And now you have.
Things I can't deal with.
Now you have that. And hey, let's think about this. We're never going to connect with everybody, right? I mean, some people you can connect with, some people you can't, but maybe Bobby could connect with, or Carol.
We're just called to try.
Yeah.
You gotta take it like it is with an analogy. You should take an unloaded gun. It's not good for anybody other than striking. You gotta know how to put the bullets in the gun to figure out, like, that's what we're going through now, is loading our gun to know where to put our bullets and where to shoot and how to do it. Make it hit its target.
I'm a little uncomfortable with this whole analogy.
Yeah, I know, it's a deed.
I see what you're saying, Brian, but
It's a little violent.
I feel like we could come up with something else.
Like I said, you gotta take it back to, you got to load the gun in order for it to do any good. That's what we're doing here. We're
Yeah,
saying
I mean-
where to fire, how to hit the target.
Yeah, this is this is
I just put it where it is.
to go with the analogy. I see what you're saying. Yeah, we are preparing.
You
Right?
got to prepare.
So the other thing I wanted.
Gun is not good for anybody, because I go around,
Well, I mean, sometimes deterrence itself is a
you
value.
unload a gun at somebody, because you're gonna get shot.
Yeah. So Gary also points out the fact of trying to have a conversation about having a further conversation. And this to me, at first just drives me nuts, because at work, I work for the state government, and we have meetings about meetings, and like it frustrates me to no end. But at the same time, it's actually a smart point. So what Gary was saying in his example with the guy who was interested in Africa, and they started talking about it, he said, hey, I'd really like to learn more about your viewpoints. Maybe we can get together for coffee sometime, say next week. And the guy was like, hey, that'd be great. And so what we're doing in this conversation about having a further conversation is we're giving the other person, we're giving them comfort, because it's going to make them more comfortable, because then any questions or anywhere that they think it's going to lead, they can prepare for. Okay, so it kind of puts the invitation on them. It also helps you, right, to figure out, think about where you want to go, right? Because we don't want to be just meandering around everywhere. And it also sets up a more intimate location, because in his example, he's around the softball fields, right? Probably not the best place to have a deep spiritual conversation about, right? So I like that theory. I really do. Now, flip side is, it's effort on your part, because you've got to take time out of your busy day, right, to go meet this person. And they may flake out, right, because people are messy and things come up, and it may be rescheduled 5 times. But keep on it. Like say, hey, even if it's rescheduled, well, let's do it and come up with another date on the spot. Because if you don't associate a date, it'll never happen. So, but that's kind of the pros and cons of it. But I think the pros outweigh the cons.
And you don't want any distractions when you're trying to communicate, especially at a ball field.
Yeah, they're at a ball field. You got kids trying to hit each other with bats, and not a great place.
No.
So I really like that, because then you can start to have those intimate conversations at a more intimate place. A coffee shop or somewhere quiet. Somewhere public, but quiet. So think about that when you're talking with people and you really want to go further, but it's not the right place or time. That is a good technique. And then he gives the example of Philip and the Ethiopian eunuch, right? How he's riding around and he goes on this journey. The eunuch is trying to read this stuff, And he's like, I don't understand it, right? And Philip gets in. He says, can you explain it to me? And invites him up in his, I always think of it as like a wagon, but caravan, whatever. And they go on this ride. They keep moving while he's explaining it to him. That's you, right? You're Philip, because you're getting on this ride, and you're not exactly sure how long it's going to be or where it's going to go. And you may go through some messy stuff as you learn about people. You're going to hear all kinds of stuff. Their divorce, how much, their father abused them, right? And you've got to, right? Part of our job is we're knocking down these barriers. These are real problems to people. But we have to, we're kind of like laying down the barriers for them. Say, hey, that's, as we get into these deeper conversations, try to explain, that's not really what God's all about, right? Now that you have a seat at the table, you can, express these things. And then he gives some tips at the end. When we talk to people and we're trying to draw them out, sometimes people need bait, right? In a fishing analogy, not a gun analogy. A fishing analogy, right? You throw your hook in the water, what are you going to catch? Not a whole lot, right? You got to add something to the hook. A little bait, a little jig, something, right? And so what people need to, especially for people that have no concept of God or have a bad concept, what's in it for me, right? That's the big question. What's in it for me? And, if you have a quick discussion about maybe some problems that they're having, like marital problems or parenting problems or, a moral conundrum that they're facing, what's in it for them? Well, God has some rules and guidelines for life that are ultimately helpful and beneficial to you, right? They will keep you out of trouble. And I would love to have, a conversation with you to tell you, what that's about. And you could express, how much it's helped in your life, for example. Some people are just going through pain and suffering, right? And what's in it for them is God promises them peace beyond all understanding, joy above all understanding. There's a million different ways this could go, right? But think about it from their perspective, because we don't think like this, right? We don't think like this, because we see God as the greatest good. It doesn't really matter what's in it for us. We want to be like Him. But for the unsaved, they don't think about it like this. What's drawing them to God, right? Because there's a separation there. Why would I take 1 foot closer to God? Well, He's going to help you be more, let's say, have a fuller, richer life. That's one example. He's going to give you guidelines to get through these difficult situations to where you can live that fuller life without regret. These are some of the ways that God could help people. And these are some of the things that you could bring up to them. So give them an idea of how it benefits them, and also kind of a picture of what this looks like. Because people, like if you go to our website, we try to give pictures of the church and the inside and pictures of people, because people want to see, what are we about, right? It's kind of a selling point. What am I getting myself into before I step inside this church, right? Are they a bunch of loons, right? Well, same way in our conversations. We have to give them a picture. What does this look like, right? And you are 90% of the picture. Your words are about 10%. Your life and what they know about you is about 90%. So that's why we've said last week, be very careful in what you're doing, because people will call out hypocrisy like that. There we go. My fingers were wet. So, keep that in mind. Get to know more. That's just getting to know the person better, right? Because we don't know exactly where it's going to go, and we phrase it like you're going to have this conversation, and you're going to go to this conversation, A, B, C, D, right? And it's going to go like that. Well, it may be more like A, B, A, B, C, A, B, A. You know, it could be kind of loopy, right? Because you may come back to the beginning all the time. But every time, don't make it a waste. Don't think of it as a waste. Because in every conversation that you have, you're always learning something more about the other person that you could keep up with later. And if you need to take notes, like feel free, like to keep notes on this person, because I can't remember everything. They said, you know, after your conversation, just what are the key thoughts that we had from that conversation? They're Jewish. They're non-practicing Jew, and, you know, some questions for yourself. Maybe some ideas for your next conversation. Why aren't you a practicing Jew? Were your parents practicing Jews? Some of the differences, like what do the Jews believe about Jesus? You know, just some ideas, just kind of go from the ideas. And then learn or address questions. Because you could also go from A to D very quickly, depending on the person. They may have like one or two major objections, and they're just gonna, if they feel like they've got you, and like in a private spot, I can ask this Christian whatever I wanted to ask about Christianity. Here we go. It could be like that. So, you know, why does God allow pain and suffering in the world? That could be a question.
And
And
that,
that-
allow it. He doesn't call it, he allows it.
You need to have an answer,
Yeah.
preferably a biblical answer, right? Not just something that you made up, something that you learned from, I don't know, Sunday school, maybe.
There's something that you run up on that all the time now, with just in and out of the public, is the faces that people wear now. They don't have any expression much anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times, no matter what you're talking to, or who, just, if you get them to break loose with a smile, if you see a smile come on their face, or if they can chuckle, it can break the ice to a lot of conversations. And it can open up that they say, he's somebody I can talk to.
Humor is always a tool in your toolbox.
It's
It's not for everybody.
It's not even something else, you know, if you give them a compliment
Mm-hmm.
about something they're doing, and it makes them feel expressive real quick, it opens up a whole lot. If you just compliment about, if they're looking down or something like that, say, hey man, you dressed nice today, what's up? You know, something like
Mhm.
that. And so, never seen you doing that much. And,
You know, a
they
good
get
word, a
excited to
compliment.
Tell you what's going on. You know?
Yeah. These are all ways to open up to somebody, right? However it needs to happen. And you always have to put yourself in a place where you can meet people. For example, if all you're doing is coming from home to church and back again, you're not meeting new people. That's part of the work that you have to do, is go out into and put yourself into a new situation. Not necessarily, I'm not saying like, you know, join a skydiving club if you have no interest in skydiving, but maybe there's a book club that, you know, you would be interested in anyway. Something that you have a natural interest. Don't force yourself, don't fake it, right? Maybe there's a sewing club. Maybe there's, you know, somebody going to a concert. Bowling team, right? Whatever. There's plenty of things out there. You just got to use some imagination. So find something to get with new people. And then the main point, circle back, right? We're always circling back to people because you can't have, I missed it, so you'll have to fill me in. You can't have a complete, more than likely, you're not going to have a 4-hour conversation with somebody. And you're never going to get, you know, a whole progression through everything in their entire life in one conversation. You're going to have to keep going at it, right? Hey, man, you know, an hour's went by, 30 minutes went by, whatever. You got to pick up your kids. You got to do this. You got to go get medicine before the pharmacy closes, whatever it is. Hey, you know, I've enjoyed our conversation. I hate to cut it short, but I've got to do this. Can we meet back together next week so we can continue the conversation? And, you know, mix it up. You know, if you went to a coffee shop, go get lunch or, you know, whatever. A million different ways. It really depends on you and your friend or whoever you're talking to. So those are the main ideas from Gary in this lesson. Now, where are you right now? What questions do you have, or what thoughts did you have on what Gary's presenting to us? Because it's a little bit different, and that's okay.
I guess I have a situation, and it relates to the circle back.
Mm-hmm.
Get up there, got some friends, they've actually been here to the sunrise service a couple of times.
Okay.
And we worked together during the week, a few days, and he told me, he said, we're done with the church thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and they're really good people. They seem to be good Christians. They were heavily involved in church for a long time, and something's happened. And I can't get him to open up to me about what happened and why they have such a negative view on church.
Mm-hmm.
And so I keep circling back when I saw that circle back, you know, but when I try to open up and get into the subject, I can see the agitation, you know, at a certain point.
Mm-hmm.
I know him well enough to back out and, you know, I'll start cutting up or doing something else, you know, to kind of ease the situation.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, I keep circling back, keep circling back, keep circling back,
Yeah.
but I'm not opening that door.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm trying to figure out, you know,
How long ago did he have this situation with the church?
it's probably been about 7 years.
7 years. Okay, so it's been a while.
Yeah.
Okay. So some people need time. And so I would think after 7 years, though, probably enough time has passed to where it's not like a fresh sore. So what I was saying is, like, if it's been like 3 months, that sore is still probably very fresh. And so sometimes the best thing, remember we talked about last week, sometimes it's just better to shut up, right? If a fresh sore, let it scab over at least before, you know, you start mentioning it. Now 7 years, that's a little different. Obviously, whatever they went through must have been very serious for them, because to have that kind of response after 7 years is a very strong response. And so you obviously have a good relationship with this person. They won't open up about this. But yet you're getting mixed signals because they came to sunrise service.
Right. That's
So
what I'm trying to get them.
So it's not like they're actually opposed to church, but maybe they're opposed of getting like involved in church. You know what I'm saying? Like, well, we've all been here. There's like people that attend church, and then there's people that help like do the church. You know, the 20-80 rule. And maybe it almost sounds like they don't want to get sucked in. You know what I mean? Like to be a part of that this is bad terminology, that inner portion that helps like run the church. Were they really involved in church before they? Yeah.
I mean, teaching and everything else, and I found it interesting. There's another friend of mine, we all three work together on the ranch over there, and he's heavily involved in church, and they're good Christian people. So I asked him, I said, Mark, why do you think the situation exists, you know, with our other buddy? And he says, I personally think he don't want to give money to the church.
Mm-hmm.
And that never even crossed my mind, you know,
Yeah.
that could be an issue, but just trying to figure out how to get, you know, into that situation, have that conversation without, you know, him getting agitated and pulling away.
Yeah, I'm trying to think, and this is a great reason why you have a conversation about having a conversation, because it gives you time to think too. I'll have to think about it, because it sounds to me like they were really hurt, and maybe, and I've seen this a lot in my own family even, is, you know, they'll go to church and church is always asking for money, right? And we kind of get that that feeling sometimes. This church is not near as bad as some of the other churches I've attended, because we're a small enough church, we can pretty much see where the money goes, right? In a big church, where's this going exactly? So I could kind of see that concern.
And
Yes.
you know, bigger churches also, in my experience living in Florida, the bigger churches actually have counseling for people who have issues like marriage or understanding. I mean, they actually have counseling.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Yeah.
this church doesn't have that, but
Yeah,
we're small.
We don't have that. I know churches around us do have that.
You have to have the right people to do that.
It takes skills, and maybe we can come to that point at one day. I don't think we're there quite yet. Brian.
What we get into is what I'm hearing, what everybody wants to be perfect or something to that nature.
Mhm.
You don't beat that scale of where you're the most religious or you're the most perfect person around. And somebody shoots you down, and you may start feeling bad about it. But it's hard for them to tell them, you read the Bible, God did not use perfect people. He used people.
Amen.
All of them had flaws. I have flaws and I know it.
Amen.
And hey, there's no perfect person.
There is
There's
no-
return
yeah.
to earth one day. And he was perfect.
And-
And
but-
we're supposed to live in his image, but it's hard to do. There is such thing as forgiveness. But,
Yeah.
it's a size enough thing that we do in society is try to say what you've done is worse than what I've done. So, and you gotta convince them that Jesus can't forgive you of your sins. How come he can't forgive somebody else?
Yeah.
And that's the hardest part they can't get up. Oh, your sins are so bad that you'll never be forgiven. And I know people that accepted Christ and that was glad to tell people that, and some Christian person would shut them down and say, you can't ever be forgiven for what you did.
All right. And if we ever see that, please stop that, because if they are professing Christian and they're saying that somebody can't be forgiven,
They're not a Christian.
that's wrong. That is just wrong. Stop that,
But
please.
there's been people that's in churches that have done people like that.
I know.
understand.
I'm not disagreeing with you, Brian, but I'm saying as Christians, we should stop that,
If you fall short,
because they're going to have a serious conversation with God.
you're gonna fall short in your life somewhere anyway.
Hmm?
And you're trying to live up to a standard.
Yeah.
You got to stop.
But I don't think-
beating yourself on yourself.
And I understand that, but I don't think that's the situation that Bobby's necessarily handling. Like, this guy, he's already in a great great relationship with Bobby, and Bobby's, decent enough. So,
Like he said, he keeps wanting to.
And you gotta realize there's a lot of homes out there that espouse different religion. One may be brought up as a Jewish belief, one may be brought up, the other spouse may be Catholic. And they teach and they learn. They don't learn off of each other, it's just that they're separate
yeah,
in that household.
And-
And poor children have to live with it.
yeah.
What Bobby's doing is what the first thing he said in the first lesson. He's taking, if it takes 7 more months or whatever, I'm here.
Yeah,
If
and
we don't ease it up, I'm not gonna leave you and get mad
Yeah.
at you because of.
yeah,
what
step
you're
one,
doing.
right?
We're gonna
Keep relationships open,
keep it
right?
open.
That's
what I'm
But what
getting
we're
at.
trying to do is draw out, because we need this person to express themselves. Like, what is it? Because we can assume all day long, right? Maybe it's about money. Maybe it's nothing about money. Maybe, and here's something that's very relevant today, with the Southern Baptist sexual abuse scandal coming out. Maybe their son, grandson, whatever, was abused at a church function. I mean, I would hate to think that, but maybe that's possible, right? And that is something that would evoke a strong response. Again, we have no idea. We need this person to express themselves. So, and I'll think about this more, Bobby. But I think what I would do is probably avoid the direct subject, but try to go exploring, if you will. Maybe bring up side subjects around things that you may think are part of the problem. So, for example, explore the money situation indirectly. And you could say something like, well, we're coming to the end of our, we're building this building at the church, and we're coming up to the end of it. they only need, however much more than that, like $10,000. And then we're done. And just leave it at that and just gauge a response. Does he seem positive about that? Does he seem negative about that? That will kind of give you a clue. Maybe bring up some of the news items, the Southern, indirectly, the Southern Baptists just finished their annual conference, and they're setting up a new committee, or I forget the name of it, commission, to study or to provide resources for churches for sexual assault cases. And maybe just leave it at that and gauge, right? Is he super positive, super negative? Does he engage with it? Does he just kind of ignore it? And maybe go exploring around different areas, and maybe you can get an idea of what the trouble is. That's my thought just off the top of my head from our discussion. But it could just take time, more time, I don't know.
That's like when Dave and I last Sunday, we went to another church.
Mm-hmm.
Because he had to sing,
Mm-hmm. Singing.
And that church was not a church. I mean.
We talked about that Wednesday, and I was very saddened to hear that.
I said, I'm never going back.
I was very saddened to hear that, because that particular church has a special place in my life. But so there's a lot going on here. Does that help you any, Bobby?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
But again, we don't want to really move forward until we can get that person to express in their words what they're, because we can assume all day long, and all we're doing is trying to get them to come out a little bit. And obviously, whatever it was very, very hurtful to them.
This
You
thing
just
about,
have to keep circling back.
Circle back, but maybe circle back in a different way.
Yeah.
this thing about people hollering all the time now, we got the younger generation. We
Hollering.
got kids that's 3 years old, and I'm like, you judging me, you judging me. And
You're right. At 3 years old.
3 years old, and he's outside, you judging me, you judging me. And it's older people, why are you judging me?
Well, because they have a distorted view of Christianity that says, judge not.
Judge not. And you-
Because they want to cherry pick that verse out and not read anything around it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Pretty sure I gave a sermon on that. So,
And the biggest thing, you're talking about that stuff, how they gonna say, well, you don't wanna work your problem out. You don't wanna say it's a problem,
Mhm.
whatever. You just don't say you saying I've got one, but hey, we're here to work it out.
yeah, but if they have this assumption that all Christians are judgmental, and the pieces that they think they know of Christianity are distorted, we've got to get past all that junk first. And that's the whole point. So draw them out. That's the focus of this lesson. There's 9 more. And so we're going to go through this. He's got a whole process, right, of how this looks. And so we're going to go through that.
I tried to find that book, and I can't find it. Barnes & Noble don't have it.
Okay, so
You're calling it Searcher,
Soul Whisperer.
Whisperer, and I wrote down Whisperer.
Okay.
And they were looking, there's 2 of them out there. One of them's called Soul Searcher.
Okay, I can send you the ISBN number. I actually bought the Kindle version on the
They have to get it
app.
online.
Yeah, but I can send you the ISBN number, and they should be able to look it up from there. So, or I know it's on Amazon. I didn't go to Barnes and
That's
Noble.
what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Again.
But I can send you the number and the title, and I'm sure you can find it from that. So, any other thoughts or questions before we close this morning? Drawing out. Put yourself in, think about this as you go through the week. Put yourself, or think about how you can get into different situations with new people. Right? I love you. I love to see you here. But Jesus didn't call his disciples just to hang out in a small group. Right? Go out into the world. And so that's what we're trying to do. And these are giving you the tools to make you feel comfortable in going out and doing it. So, all right. Well, if there's nothing else,
It's easier to go out and talk to strangers than it is some immediate.
I see. I do not find that true. I cannot talk to a real stranger.
Strangers
like that.
open up to you about anything mostly.
Nah.
But family members want you to keep your mouth shut. I'm worried about what I'm doing.
Well, you don't know what a stranger.
Well, it's true. It's true. I do find it difficult to talk to family members.
Yeah.
But I also find it very difficult to talk to strangers. Like, I need to have something in common with them. Like, because a stranger to me is somebody, I don't really wish them harm, but I don't really care. Whereas somebody, even just a small acquaintance, like I have some effort of caring, and I may be wrong on my part, right? But a stranger, like, I pass 1 million people a day. I can't interact with every single one of them. But if I have an interaction, a connection point somewhere, that gives me more impetus. But Brian, you're wired differently. Maybe, I mean, some people, like Tiffany's grandfather, kind of guy, he's never met a stranger. He could walk up to anybody. I'm not wired like that.
That's the beauty of CMA, is we have the vehicle, the motorcycle, when we go and volunteer at these events, and that bridges the gaps to be able to get to.
CMA is a great example of this, right? Because they've really taken kind of this idea, right? They're using the motorcycle to draw out. I love it. And look at all the great work that the CMA has done. We're just taking that same approach, just on a personal level. So we have to close. I'm sorry, we got people coming in and we got people filling in. So I hope everybody has a great, take this to your heart. And we'll talk, we could talk after this or we could talk later. Let's close in prayer. Father, thank you for this opportunity to come and study your word, to take this lesson from Gary and apply it to our hearts and our minds as we go out into the world, to draw people closer to you, and pray that we can be a vessel to allow that to happen. Be with us this week.